This is the second lecture burst for Chapter 10. We're going to pick up where we left off. We had covered biological elements for aggression. Now we're going to take a look at some gender differences. And so I have here just a quick trying to get you to remember of a time when you could compare a woman who did something designed to hurt another person versus a man who did something to hurt another person. How did those differ? Which examples in those instances were more direct versus more indirect in terms of type of aggression? And just be thinking about that. One video that I posted on Play-Doh is taking on Mean Girls. It's a what would you do video in a scenario where there's some bullying going on. So I want you to take a look at that and particularly look at the types of indirect aggression that we're seeing, and verbal aggression mostly. And that tends to be what we see in girls, although that is changing. In terms of gender differences in aggression, males tend towards more hostile, overt aggression than females. Females tend to be more relational in their aggression, so it tends to be more indirect aggression. And one thing that we don't often think about is that males are also more often the victims of aggression. It's just the type of aggression is different. We hear a lot about physical aggression of males towards females, but what we don't hear a lot of is the indirect aggression or verbal aggression that females often demonstrate towards males. And provocation is a big factor there too. So being provoked, right? The gap between aggressiveness in males and females is closing, but males are maintaining their aggressiveness and females are becoming more aggressive as gender roles are changing and societal norms are more accepting of aggression. We're seeing that change a little bit. Women are more likely to hit men in their relationships, surprisingly, but men do more damage. So that's what we tend to hear more of. Men engage in more physical aggression with more intensity. Men have also been shown to have a shorter fuse, so that's that provocation factor. They're provoked a lot easier. It doesn't take as much for them to lash out in aggressive ways. And so also we want to consider testosterone. There's that biological element. Is it a cause or a consequence of aggressive or antisocial behavior? Is it that it happens due to factors in someone's social world? Or does it cause factors like aggression in someone's social world? We're seeing increasingly more portrayals of violent females in the media. And one question that we can ask is it rising the social okayness of violence in females? Is it becoming popular? Is it becoming all of a sudden cool to be depicted as a violent and aggressive female? I mean, violence and aggression all around, male or female, shouldn't be promoted, but we're seeing it promoted in very strong ways in female characters. And this is actually part of the assignment for this week. I mentioned it earlier in the last lecture burst, but this Bad Girls article talks about the so-called liberation hypothesis and just the increasing nature at which we're seeing females portrayed in very aggressive ways, and what might be the reason for that. And then what are the social consequences? Are they the same for females as males? Like if women act out in aggressive ways, the same ways that men do they get the same consequences? And you're going to see that there's a lot of factors that influence that there. So that's part of the reading homework for this week. So now we're going to get into just some theories of aggression. Drive theories are some of the oldest theories where it's stated that external conditions drive us to harm others via overt aggression. And this generally bleeds right into the frustration aggression hypothesis. So frustration is one of those external conditions, and it can arouse us, it can get us irritated, frustrated, right? And so it can drive us to commit aggressive acts. And so what we do is we're trying to cope with the feelings that we're having, those frustrating feelings of annoyance. And we do so by coping in a way that's maladaptive because we're acting out in aggressive ways. And so this hypothesis would state that any event actually associated with negative feelings, that can be pain you're having, physical pain, being hot, right? So heat, here's some of those situational elements. Psychological discomfort like anxiety or fear can lead to aggression. So frustration is that negative feeling associated with failing to reach a goal or obtain something that you're hoping to do. And frustration aggression theory just, really holds that aggression is a direct consequence of that building frustration. And it has to do with relative deprivation. And this is something we talked about when we were in the chapter on prejudice and discrimination. The feeling that someone or someone else out there has something that we do not, that we're deprived in some sort of way, can build that frustration and build those feelings inside. And so a negative result is that it leads to aggression. And then this is the primary underlying element to the theory. So, even something like waiting in a long line might trigger aggressive behavior because as we're waiting, frustration's building. The more modern theories of aggression have built on this, and we have different takes of it. Social learning perspective puts a lot of emphasis on modeling. What kinds of behaviors are modeled to kids very early on that they might then learn maladaptive ways of channeling their frustration, of dealing with the frustration, and they might model aggressive behaviors that they've seen. Of course, we know this from Bandura's early studies with the Bobo doll, and he showed that kids do in fact model the aggressive behaviors they see in the adults. And so I put a video on Play-Doh. It's modeling behaviors to our kids. Be careful what you show because your kids are watching. But aggression originates in the experience and or the observation of other people. That's the primary underlying element in the social learning perspective of where aggression is learned, and that we learn it through our culture. We learn from culture the numerous ways that we can harm others, whether it be from a sitcom or just the media or how other people around us deal with their aggression. We learn what we can and can't do. We learn who's an appropriate target for our aggression. Who can I pick on versus who can I not pick on? This will come into play in just a bit when we talk more about bullying. We also learn both positive and negative ways of dealing with that frustration and channeling it. While kids can model and view aggression, they can also model and view empathy. And so empathy is a big component in this. We talked all about that last chapter. If kids haven't learned adaptive ways of channeling their frustration, it's really going to thwart their development of empathy. And developing empathy really comes from modeling non-aggressive behaviors. So if we're watching, according to social learning theory, if we're watching our parents fight at a very young age, if they argue very aggressively, we're going to be more likely to engage in similar aggressive verbal behavior than a child of calmer parents would. Some of the social causes of aggression, the media is a huge one here. Is there a relationship between media and violence? Yes. but we don't know, the directionality of that relationship. It may or may not be causal. Does the media cause us to be more violent? That's a hard question to answer because you have so many intervening variables, confounding factors. It's hard to isolate just the effects that media have on a person's level of aggression. But we do know that we model aggression via the characters that we see, that we watch, whom we idolize maybe as a child. We're going to model those relationships that we see. And a lot of media primes us for aggressive tendencies. The media can really, and this has been shown, cause us to think more violently, right? So we see negative examples of how aggression is dealt with via the media. We see ways of bullying, we see ways of indirect and direct aggression, and the media primes us for those. I mean, think about video games and the effect those have. And here's where we get into violence in the media. A huge meta-analysis looked at media violence and how it enhances children and adolescents' aggression in their interactions, not only with their classmates or their friends, but also with strangers. And the correlation's pretty moderate. It's a 0.3, which is the same correlation as smoking and cancer. So that's some food for thought. It's a very compelling statistic. And what we know is that violence in the media, the effect of it is often that we're repeatedly exposed to that violence. It's all around in the media, like it's no big deal now. And so what can happen is desensitization can occur. And so the desensitizing effect is that our emotional reactions are dimmed, they are lessened to mistreatment or harm physically, but also we see this with sexual victims gradually reducing over time. So you look at very graphic and violent video games that not just adults are playing, but kids are playing too. And you see that we've developed a culture of violence, and that's fast becoming the norm. And it's not just with guns, but it's with self-harm, it's with mutilation, hating ourselves so much that we want to cause ourselves harm. And these ways have always been around in the past, but they're more easily accessible now. They're more seen now. They're not novel or new, but the media provides avenues to which we're more commonly seeing this, viewing it, especially with social media. It's changed our psychology. We can click on a few things and easily find ways to hurt ourselves or others, much more accessible. And there's a glamorizing of violence in the media. These have some stats here for you. Good, quote unquote, characters commit 40% of violent acts. So it's a violent act, but because it's someone who's supposedly good, we see it differently. Over 30% of programs feature bad characters who are never punished. So we don't necessarily always see the consequences of actions, at least on TV, movies, media. 70% of aggressors show no remorse for their violence. So we see the fun, glamorizing end of violence. Haha, this is great. I won. I got victory. We don't see the remorse behind it, that, oh my gosh, I caused tragedy, or I really hurt somebody, or I hurt other people by hurting this somebody. We don't see that. 50% of TV violence involves no physical injury or suffering, so it might be indirect. Parental discretion advised isn't taken seriously. It actually makes kids more interested in watching or playing a game. And female physical aggression is increasing. So we'll stop there, and then in the next video podcast, we're going to be talking about bullying and cyberbullying specifically.